Okay, we should be set.
Thank you, Summer. Thank you everyone for joining us for this joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting. It is October 27th and it's 6:04 p.m. We are joining together to discuss planning priorities for us in the city. And I just want to welcome the Planning Commission here with the City Council as well as staff. And we will start the meeting off, this pre-council workshop off with a roll call of everyone who is in attendance. And Summer, I'm going to have you do that roll call for us.
Okay, we'll start at the top. For City Council, we have Mayor Emily Niehaus. We have Kaylin Jones, Karen Guzman Newton, Mike Duncan, Ronnie Dressary, and Tawny Knudsen Boyd. For the Planning Commission, we have Jess O'Leary, Kaya Marienfeld, Marianne Becknell, and Ruben Villapando Salas. And you have staff participating. You have me as your recorder, Carly, Assistant City Manager, Corey as the Assistant Planner, Nora as Planning Director, and Lori Simonson is City Attorney. And I see Joel as our City Manager. And I think I got everybody. Did I miss anyone?
I think you got us all. Thank you so much, Summer.
Okay.
And we'll get started. I'll pass the mic over to Nora to guide us through this discussion. And again, thank you everyone for joining tonight. It's really nice to see everybody.
Okay, and Becky may join later. So just a heads up, but she did send me her rating sheet. So that is included in some of the information I'm going to talk about. So what I'm going to do is go through kind of how we just, and at the same time, it will give you an idea of what kinds of projects we're working on. So it's kind of a dual, it's sort of an update and then leads to the priorities. And I have a Google Sheets doc that has 4 or 5 different sheets on it. And what I'm going to do, and I did this with the Planning Commission, is really briefly, just so that you can get a sense of how this list was derived and the kinds of things that we're working on. So first of all, I just have a, you guys see that? Yes, okay.
Yep.
So, come on, computer. I've been having a heck of a time with my computer. There we go. So again, we're going to discuss, first of all, with the strategic plan that we did toward the beginning of the year. Then we're going to review some Google Sheets, as I mentioned, and then we're going to review the planning priority ranking sheet and add items and talk about them. And then I have 5 planning commissioners that gave me responses. And so I have an average of what their scores were, just so you all know. So this is kind of a starting point for the planning department. The beginning of every year, the council, or every other year, I think it's every year, the council does a strategic plan meeting where everybody, as you know, kind of reports on our goals for last year and what we've accomplished, and then projects some into the future. And this is what ended up in the final report. So these were basically kind of our marching orders for 2020. Understanding that our highest priorities will always be development applications and answering inquiries and public information. Priorities, period. If somebody's paid a fee and they filed an application, then that becomes a priority. If we've gotten a phone call or an email asking for information or wanting to do some discussion, those things are always our highest priority. So the department goals for 2020, complete master planning for Walnut Lane. You're familiar with Walnut Lane, but obviously is something that will be ongoing. review and amend the PAD and assured workforce housing provisions, develop standards to allow new overnight accommodations in commercial zones, clean up a planning process and development for better public information engagement, and continue to train department staff. So this is when last year, this is Corey and Caitlin were both pretty new when we had this discussion. So that's what the training is about. And then general goals for the next 3 to 5 years, overhaul the development code, especially the subdivision regulations, become efficient and responsive to the public, build on existing programs to encourage workforce housing, build on existing programs to promote sustainability, get Walnut Lane done, proceed with the next affordable housing project. There we go. So the sheets that I prepared, the first sheet is kind of a typical week of this questions that we answer and how Corey and I keep track of them. The one I'm going to show you is a couple of weeks ago, but just so you can get an idea of what we do when we get an inquiry. Sheet 2 are active and recent applications that are in process. So this is going to show all the applications that we've received in 2020 and their status. We keep a running list of code amendments whenever we're looking at the code, and we all go, this doesn't make any sense. It needs to be changed. Well, Corey and Lori keep a running list. And so I'm going to show you that. Some of the items that Lori added to the list that aren't planning related. So anyway, and then ordinance amendments in the works, things that we're already working on. And then came a sort of a preliminary list of potential planning priorities and projects. And that led to the ranking sheet that y'all have. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing this, get out of it, and I have to find the right sheet. Okay. So this is these are the 5 Google Sheets that I created. It's all one document, but it's 5 sheets. So these are the kinds of things that we do on a, in any given week. These are people that we've talked to, follow-up is needed.
Nora, are you trying to share a screen right now? Because right now it's not shared.
Share screen. The screen. Share. Okay. So it's just, it's representative. So we talk to people about rezones, lot consolidations. We have a bunch of pre-application meetings, follow up on existing applications, discussions of new pending applications. We review every single building permit and every single business license that comes through the city. And I get DocuSign documents for all of those. So I have to sign off on each one individually. So that's a lot. And so some of these questions are generated from either from 1 or 2 of those. Sometimes building permits, we review every single one, and there are some big planning issues related. You never see those because we work them out all internally, and then we move forward and can issue a building permit. So some of these are in that list. For example, the Shannon building plan resubmittal, we've been working with him on and off for several years, but right now he's trying to get the second building built, and we have all kinds of back and forth about a sewer and stuff like that. So while it's just a building permit, it takes a fair amount of time with some applicants. And then just some discussions about things that we either had or need to have. So that's kind of a typical sort of what we do in a week. These are all of the applications that we've received since in 2000. And a lot of them we're done with. There's some that are still the EMS application. The Planning Commission is about to get a look at that maybe in November. This is a site plan approval, although we've been working with them since February, and they've been working on plans as well. We do have an application. Spitfire is approved. Most of these are approved. Sun Slick Rock Campground. Seems like we have 3: Moab Valley, Sun Slick Rock, and Portal RV are all amending their site plans, and there are no new overnight accommodations, but they're rearranging some stuff a little bit. So that's ongoing. You never see it. We deal with it. So there's some, these are a bunch of plats that that you've approved. Homes, I think, are done. And then these are no further action. And then there's some that I think may need to finalize their plat, but basically they're done. And then we have some new ones that just came in this week. Rezone, phase 3 minor subdivision. There's actually a couple more that have come in the last week. So that's just an idea of all of the applications. Thompson Townhomes is one that originally was 6 townhomes, but they don't have to go to Planning Commission if it's 5. So now it's 5, and we're working with him through the building department issue. But we work really closely with the building department and engineering department on every single application. We have lots of coordination. Code amendments, these are in, I won't go over these at all, but these are things that we just kind of note when somebody says, gosh, we need to change the code. So this is just a list, a running list that we've had, and there are quite a few changes. I come up with some other changes. We have 3 ordinances or that are somewhere in the process and that we need to tend to conclude. The overnight accommodations, we're continuing. The Planning Commission actually has had 4 work sessions on these since we last chatted about it. So we're kind of on specific items that the council asked us to look at with the Planning Commission. And so the next step for me would be to take all the changes that you all recommended in January, and then the changes that are coming out of the Planning Commission, and to do a revised document, which then will be in the Planning Commission's hands. So that's where we are with that one. Assured workforce housing, this has to do with the size of units. If they are building on site and concurrent with the primary use, this one's still sort of out there. Other priorities kind of shifted it. And then we were just directed through resolution to do the land use code to prohibit new ATV and UTV businesses. So those are all things that we will be working on. And then from all those lists, this is kind of the preliminary priorities list in no certain order. Just, it's how it was generated. So it was a process whereby I generated this. I'm going to stop sharing that. And then I'm going to start sharing a different document. Okay. Okay, can you see that? Yeah? No?
Not yet.
There it is. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So what I did is before we met with the Planning Commission meeting, I kind of tried to organize these into broad subjects. And so this is the list. I sent you this list. Well, I've added some things, but I sent you this list on Monday so that you could kind of take a look at it and figure out what we're doing. So we had 5 planning commissioners respond and did their rankings 1, 2, and 3, which is awesome. I am really encouraged by that. And then so what I did is I wrote down all of theirs and then came up with an average. The lower, the better in terms of priorities. So as you can see, we're talking about finishing the OA standards, develop standards for the C1, 2, and 3, develop requirements for civic space and local art installation. Those are all, I mean, a lot of these are in the 1.6, 1.8, 1.6 range. Consider adding the R2 to areas where the pad is developed. Develop an ADU library with examples and preliminary plans is something we've been talking about for a while, and there are probably other housing things. At some point, we should do a whole separate discussion on housing, but these are some of the things that I just picked out that we need to move forward with fairly quickly. Subdivision ordinance, our subdivision ordinance is really old and it's not necessarily consistent with state law, and it really needs updating. There are no it's just very lacking. So if we had a better subdivision ordinance, it would be easier for us to tell people what the rules are. Rewrite and codify Chapter 17. So this is just kind of a rewrite of the whole code to make it more understandable. Right now, things are kind of all over the place in Chapter 17, and trying to find that section that you've been looking for is really, really difficult. Even, I mean, I've been using this now for a year and a half or so, and it's still impossible to find things sometimes. Add language to allow C3, in the C3 zone to allow breweries. We actually have been contacted by a restaurateur who wants to do a brew pub. So that's on our list. Omnibus changes, that's that. What we thought we'd do is some of the changes that are all clarifications and definitions and stuff, we could do all as one as kind of an omnibus cleanup. So that's not necessarily, that it hasn't been pulled out as a specific priority, but it's kind of the cleanup. Seasonal outdoor dining in commercial zones. Right now we're allowing them due to COVID. And so we want to look at a land use change in order to allow them. They used to be conditional uses, but we don't have conditional uses anymore. So they've sort of fallen into never, never land in our code. And that one probably got one of the lowest scores, is 1.2. Modify zones to not allow ATVs and UTVs. Reviewing permitted uses in city zones. This is one that the Planning Commission actually came up with, just to make sure that we're allowing things where we want to allow them. Sign code consolidation and changes to make things more clear. We have two issues with the sign code. One is it's in two separate chapters of our municipal code, which is silly. It's in 15 and 17. So we need to put it in one place or the other. And it just to make things, we need to look at it to make things a little bit more understandable for people. Corey spends a lot of time on the phone explaining sign code stuff to people. Area, and then these 5, 3, 4, 5 are items that Kalen added. He actually sent me his list that are in green. So parking requirements adjusted, I think that primarily means number parking spaces per use. Noise ordinance evolution, whether that's, maybe the noise ordinance doesn't really belong in Chapter 17, or the noise issues, maybe it belongs somewhere else, but just a review of that. A minimum, this should be minimum. A minimum development of density. I guess Kaylin was interested in figuring out, at least in the R3, what the minimum number of units are we want people to build. My computer, like I said, is being totally weird. It just doesn't type. Anyway, water conservation measures, which is really a good thing to talk about, as well as revised landscape standards. Definitely something we need to do. And then area and plan development revised. So a while ago, we did a Main Street plan or downtown plan. It was recommended by Planning Commission, but was never adopted by City Council. I think this was when It was before my time, but I think we started talking about taking parking off Main Street, and it got really controversial. And so once the hotspot funding is kind of settled on, then the recommendation is to review that plan that was never adopted and incorporate any changes that we want to make to include the hotspot parking initiatives that we're talking about. There are also some things in that Main Street plan that are clearly not permitted by UDOT and never will be. So those should probably be yanked out. It calls for a median all the way down, like a raised median that's landscaped, and we know that UDOT won't let us do that. So community nodes, right at the end of overnight accommodations or concurrent with it, we asked Landmark Design to work on 4 or 5 community nodes. In other words, these are areas that serve primarily residents. And we do have some basic information from them. They did kind of a land use inventory and made some comments and made a couple recommendations on each of those. So that's what the community nodes is. Develop Moab specific transportation and streets plan. What this is about is that right now, the county and San Juan County and the city are working on a regional transportation plan, or an RTP, with UDOT and Fair and Pierce, it's not Fair and Pierce. Anyway, John Epstead. They're doing a regional transportation plan, which ideally you have in place if you want to ask for federal funding. They require that it's part of the RTP. And based upon that, then we can develop our own transportation and streets plan that's even more detailed, so that when somebody comes in with a development, we know what to tell them in terms of requirements, and it will also give us help planning our capital improvements programs when we start getting money in again, that we can actually do things. Sidewalk plan and policy, something that was recently added based upon the city council direction. Paid parking, I don't know whether that's a planning function or not. It's not really us, but it gets a 2 overall. I can tell you from experience that that's a battle that will take a lot of time and energy, because whenever you start messing with people's parking, they kind of go berserk. So address e-bike on city's trails. These 2 again are Kalen's, which is a good idea. And then adopt a complete streets policy. That's a request from Karen, also an excellent idea. The Planning Commission didn't have the green ones when they rated theirs.
Were we also, sorry to interrupt, going to add the 2-hour parking or on Main Street?
That was paid parking, but we can say
the concept wasn't necessarily paid, it was more just 2-hour.
And I also suggested a parking permit system. There's some notes in my spreadsheet that aren't fully captured here, but maybe we can talk about it eventually or not.
E-bikes, complete streets. Additional public information on the dark sky ordinance, because we do have an amortization policy. All residences and businesses are supposed to be compliant within 5 years. We've been over a year. So at some point we really need to get out there. We started to do it and then COVID hit. Sustainability plan has never been adopted. And then Kayla now dark sky certification, which I know that we've had ongoing efforts with the dark sky committee, and Corey's been participating in that. Public information, revise applications and public information for planning procedures. We have these little 1-pagers or 2-pagers that talk about the application and what's required and what the process is. And those all need to be updated and cleaned up. We also have things about each zone. And again, they're not updated, so we need to do that. We have been working on this when Laura Allred was still here. And when she comes back, hopefully she can start this back up again, depending on the direction I get. Develop an easy to understand packet on ADUs. That one gets a pretty low rating. Dissemination on ongoing planning efforts. This was a planning commission edition. I think they want, when we do a survey or something like that online, they want us to notify them about these citywide efforts. Some other things require underground utilities. Again, this was a planning commission recommendation. And then Unified Community Development Office with the county, but no unified code at this time. This is again Kalen's addition. Community art, requiring public art as a part of large developments and develop guidelines for implementation. We have a planning commissioner, or several actually, that are really interested in this. As you can see it with most of the planning commission, it was rated pretty low, which is good. And then historic preservation commission, our code requires us to have a historic commission and requires us to maintain a list, none of which we do. So it is a section, it's required by code, but we don't do it. And I know that the county has some bare bones, not much. I've tried to get in touch with them to find out about some basic information. And I don't even know if it's like a group anymore, but anyway, so I need direction on whether you want us to move forward with that or not. Again, it's a really great initiative that I love to do, but it will take a fair amount of time. And then, so these are the averages for the planning commission. And then I also got Kalen and Ronnie's input, and all I put down here were just the priorities. Since I got most of these today, I didn't have time to put in all the comments and some of the timeframes, but in general, the timeframes are consistent with the priorities, which kind of makes sense. There are a couple exceptions, but so that's how we generated this list, and those are the rankings so far. So, and these that Kalen added, only Kalen has voted because nobody else got them yet. So in terms of priorities in the Planning Commission, public art's important. Just better communication with the staff and the Planning Commission on city initiatives. ADU packet, make it easier to understand. Sustainability plan adoption. Sidewalk plan and policy. Develop community nodes is pretty high. Review the downtown plan is 1.8, so that's pretty, that's good. Sign code 1.5 or 1.6, permitted uses 1.5, modify zones 1.6, 1.2, 1.3 is omnibus changes. 1.2, amend the code to allow seasonal outdoor dining. So that's a pretty easy one we can do. It's a high priority. And then in terms of lower ones, ADU, we already covered that, but I had it twice just for double emphasis. And then finish the RCC4 zones and then move on to the C1, 2, and 3 standards. So I can send this to everybody if they want to have it on their computers to look at. But at this point, we can we can talk about some of these items, and Kalen, you can talk about the ones you added. We can hear from the planning commissioners about what their highest priorities are, and then we can turn it over to the council, and each council person can kind of go through what their priorities are and why. We may need to do a follow-up session with the council after we because I'm sure more information will be needed, and that's fine. Priorities is an ongoing thing. So we may need a follow-up session for that. So how would you like to proceed, Mayor?
Well, Thank you for taking us through those different sheets that inform how you're organizing all of this. I think it's probably worth it to give the other council members and myself time to rank items as well, just so that you have you know, a good idea of where everything falls. And then at that point, I guess we would review the like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan that maybe you could put together for us to all see. So there's the ranking and then you putting that together. But I guess what you're asking for right now is just more qualitative, just kind of verbal feedback about certain things, like maybe what's missing in this list, or what needs further clarification. Like, for example, I don't know if it's just me, but there was an item. If you scroll down, then I can see it. I'm sorry, it's really small on my screen. There was but don't worry. I mean, I think I'm the only one that's like leaning in to try to read it. It might also be my eyes. I'm a little older today than I was yesterday. Oh gosh, what was it? Oh, much bigger. Thank you. It was toward the bottom. Gosh, sorry. This is kind of I should have just jotted it down. It was in the other section, but I don't see that as a label on the left.
No, because
Requiring underground utilities. So that must have been a conversation that the Planning Commission had, but I'm not aware of that issue at all, nor has that been a conversation at the council level for the years that I've been here. And I'm surprised to see that on this list and even as priority. So
the Planning Commission was able to add things just like you are able to add things. And then we can, you know, talk through some of those for sure. So Mayor, I think it would be great if the planning commissioners could kind of let the council know sort of what their thinking is in general. I think each one of them would like to kind of explain their rationale, and I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I would love that. And why don't we go ahead and unshare your screen so we can all just be looking at each other and have a conversation about and listen to the planning commissioners about priorities. I like that.
Okay. So frustrating. Okay. All right. So I will stop sharing. Do you want me to send this to council members so they can pull it up if they want, or?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'd like it, Nora.
I'd like to see it.
Okay. I'll share.
So sharing with the council and the planning commissioners.
Yes.
And I guess in no particular order, otherwise starting with Kaya. Oh, Mike, did you have your hand up?
I did. So if I may, I would also like to see that priority document, and Nora, it would be most useful to me if you just made it a shared document that we could all simply view and even better yet, edit. So we could add columns out there to the right of Ronnie and Kaylin's priority ranking, and the rest of us could weigh in on that. That would be great. And related to that is the other 5 spreadsheets that you showed, Nora, which is great. If you could make that again a document that may be shared among all the council members as well as the staff. Some of us have been pleading for a tracking document, you know, and not something, you know, it's kind of a reference document to me. Once in a while I go, well, what is the Planning Commission up to these days? And I could kind of use that document as a clue to what's going on. So I would appreciate that.
Okay.
And I guess I'll stop there. Thank you.
Karen, I see your hand up if you want to share something, and then we'll move on to hearing from the commissioners.
I'm just wondering if Nora and Corey, if
because I don't see your rankings in there, would it be helpful to have your input as well? Because I mean, I feel like you're on the ground in the office every day, and it would probably be justifiable to see what is your number ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think, geez. Okay, I'm gonna have to share this from Google Docs, I think. I don't know.
We could,
I'm sorry. Yes, certainly Corey and I could do that. We didn't even think about that. I was just trying to get all this thrown together to get to you. So we can add sort of staff's input as well. I think that's a great idea. I hadn't really thought about that. So that's a really good idea.
I just feel like that, you know, oftentimes we have dream projects and sometimes they don't coordinate with the realities of what you guys are seeing. So
Right.
Yeah, the planning commission as well. I think we kind of get a little better with you all about what the priorities and what the things that can be knocked out relatively quickly versus longer term projects are. To see your priorities, I think that would help us evaluate too.
Kaya, do you want to kick us off as the chair with comments on priorities?
Sure. I will say, I apologize if it cuts out. My internet has been really terrible for the last week, particularly on. Yeah, I think my rankings in going through the importance levels and the timeframes were really trying to get a mix. All the things I gave high importance level to were either things I thought were relatively quick timeline tasks that we could, I don't undervalue the ability to check things off a list. If we have things that are shorter timeline projects, even if they're smaller and might, be farther down the line, I think there are good things that we can continue to sort of do to, one, make sure the public knows what we're doing, and to do, producing a user-friendly guide to ADUs was something I ranked high in timeline, because that's one of those things where we have all that information, but collating it in a way that would be more user-friendly to the public, I think would both reflect well on the city planning staff and the council and the commission. The same thing goes for disseminating more information about the Dark Skies Initiative. We did that a year ago now, or a little under a year ago. And just I've seen regularly some confusion about what that means in the public sphere. And I think it's incumbent on the city to make sure that we are the ones putting the most information out there about that. So, and then obviously things that we're working on right now, trying desperately to get done, but this year being this year have sort of stymied that. I did rank development standards for the C1, 2, and 3 higher than development standards for RC and C4 zone, even though we are currently working on RC and C4. I just see the C1, 2, and 3 being the biggest priority areas because we have a necessity, I think, of flexibility in those areas, and figuring out that's more targeted, I think, towards local community members who have a bit of property here and a bit of property there. And so I want to make sure that those folks have some assurance on what they can and can't do with their property sooner rather than later, instead of the RC where we have 3 parcels left now ultimately that really don't have anything on them. 4 parcels. And we need to get it figured out, obviously, and we're close to having that done. But I think getting clarity on land use in the majority of city limits, which is those other C1, C2, and 3 zones, and maybe combining zones and maybe sort of streamlining what things. And I think that really links into rewriting language to make things, we know what we want each zone to be, sort of the character. And I think we definitely need to go through and reevaluate what the allowed uses are. We've definitely had times that we've come across something that someone wants to do, which seems to fit in the zone, but which isn't permitted. And so they have to get special dispensation to do that. And obviously we want to avoid that as much as possible. So was there anything, Nora or Emily, anyone that was surprising about any of my rankings or needed clarification?
No, and we might try to pick up the pace a little bit and just hear from all the other planning commission members. If
Yeah,
that
sure.
works. So Kaya, do you want to kind of pick who goes next?
Yeah, sure. Jesso, do you want to go next?
Sure. So yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Kaya said, and ranking, I try to focus on what makes Moab more livable for the residents. And I think the community nodes are a good. And I also think it's important when we're looking at the codes, because we could spend hours and hours, and I could C1, C2, C3, but if we don't have any way to and make sure people are in compliance, I'm not sure what the advantage of spending all that time redoing all the codes are. So working with the city, how we can get people in different areas into compliance.
And Jessica, I am planning to have our code compliance person, Mona, come to maybe the next planning commission meeting, depending on what else is on the agenda, to kind of talk about the enforcement issues a little bit.
And Emily, I had kind of mentioned the underground utilities, in partly with the construction of the highway. If we're going to be redoing streets and ripping all this stuff up in our view shed, why don't we see if we can get some of those utilities put underground? But that was just an idea.
Well, I think this is a good exercise where we're putting together ideas, but then we're ranking these ideas as a body. A lot of the things that are on the list we've been talking about for several years now. And so I'm sure that that'll kind of fit out in the ranking, but it's always good to put new ideas on lists like this, and see how they stick.
Right.
All right, who's next? Who wants to go next?
We'll have Ruben go next.
So an important thing for me overall when I was going through the priority list was probably the visual aspect of it all, as just driving through town. One of the big ones that let me see if I can find it, was requiring public art. And I think one of the more important parts about that is that as we're having these bigger buildings coming in and hotels, and a lot of people are concerned about the view shed, I just want something that's more visually engaging. And so just public art in general, I really liked what Kaylin said about landscaping standards. And that's something that I didn't realize I wanted. But overall, it was more concerned with the visual aspect of it. Yeah.
All right, and finally, Marianne.
Yeah, so my biggest priority is just to define some civic open spaces. That can either be along with community nodes or with our other larger developments. But I'd really like us to prioritize setting aside some land for the needs of the community in the future, and expecting our numbers to grow and expecting us to have land available to do other things with in the future, like laundromats and daycares and hospitals and all of those amenities that we need to make this a livable community.
Okay. Thank you. Is that everybody? It's everybody. That's awesome. So Mayor, do you want just some input from the council members? And
I'd love now next to hear from council members, and Ronnie looks very excited. So
I had too many cups of coffee. I've moved to
decaffeinated tea, but I don't know if it's working. So I just wanted to thank the Planning Commission members because that's really helpful, because I do think that we're all, at least I'm on the same page with you guys. I'm more interested in the things that we can do and focus on. I mean, I want to work on short-term and longer-term stuff at the same time, but I really do want to hammer down and focus on stuff that has more to do with our residents and their quality of life. That's, I don't know, I feel like it's just gotten short script for a while. Kaylin, I'm just going to get in touch with you probably to go over some of the things that you listed, because I think I can just add to yours. But in case anybody likes any of these and they don't feel like they're on the list, I mean, I had just gone back and look at my notes from this spring, or just, you know, little ones I've had along the way. And they were things like, and sometimes, Nora, you can correct me too, because I get a little bit confused about where planning crosses over sometimes with public safety, but things like, you know, ideas that we can incorporate for traffic calming. And, you know, sometimes it seems like some of the ideas people throw out there for green infrastructure, things that could fit in with there. Sometimes, you know, it's things people have thrown out, like, can we have entering residential, you know, neighborhood signs? A lot of this has to do with the traffic and noise concerns right now. And yes, I'm very in favor of spending some time on our noise ordinance and trying to update that sucker, and Kaylin's idea of parking permits. I don't know if this fits in more on the public safety end, but I am someone who's like a broken record on just hoping to get our speed limits down to the same number, because 20, 25, 30 is just too confusing. I think it causes some of the engines to rev more than they need to, and it also is a little bit confusing safety wise. Again, I feel like there's a lot of interest in the community right now to tackle the noise thing, and all of the, I feel like it's like a spider with multiple legs. And so kind of anything and everything related to that, including the events. And I'm concerned, for me, a priority is trying to figure out how we can integrate some of the sustainability ideas that are out there, specifically ones that have to do with climate and greenhouse gas reduction. So I might kind of need help from Emily or some of you who have more experience on the building end, but I'm kind of interested if there is any code we can introduce that would, you know, help us, whether it's the gray water or other energy saving ideas in construction to work in, but certainly on the water end as well. I am, you know, this might be more on Kaylin's landscape end, but I definitely am looking for ways to start and keep going something that's keeping shade in mind as we go here, because we know we're going to have climate change and heat islands. And every time we're putting more concrete out there, we're making, in some ways, a less walkable space. And I think we all want more. Sorry, I've got a squeaking dog in the background. Just transportation alternatives. So some of that sustainability stuff and anything we could do for water is on my mind. We're talking about the Mill Creek later tonight, and you know, there's some sense that that's been down cutting for a while, and maybe one reason that's been happening, that the creek bed keeps getting lower, is too much of our storm water goes into the creek bed instead of being able to spread out more. So I am interested in things we can do to let that spread out in places, and it might have some things to do with Kaylin's concept of green streets and green infrastructure and letting things move and spread out in other places. So
Hey,
I realize, again,
Ronnie,
sorry. Yeah.
Ronnie, I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to give every council member a chance, and I would like to have 4 or 5 minutes before our regular meeting.
Okay. So Nora, thanks for sending that out. I'll send a little note of these things, because I wrote you earlier. I didn't have time to type them all up.
And so I think with council members, bullet points would be helpful, of just because we're coming to the end of our time meeting together. Connie, go ahead.
I'll be super fast. I just want to thank Planning Commission and staff for doing this. This helped me see what you've got going on. I'm going to spend a little bit more time with it, and I will put my priorities in there, but I do appreciate all your efforts.
Thanks, Tani. Who's next? Kaylin?
Since I've already effectively taken up some time, I'll try to be quick. Again, I really appreciate seeing a little bit behind the scenes for the Planning Commission and planning staff. That was super helpful, and just being able to like have view-only access to the spreadsheets, I think would address some of the concerns that we've had just about more understanding of what's going on in City Hall. I agree with what Kaya said about the need to maybe focus on the commercial zones, because I feel like we really want to encourage mixed use downtown, I think, regardless of the OA issue, as well as address the aesthetics of new development, and encourage it, which is why I brought up the parking, because I think that our current parking code, which views sort of parking as a problem to be solved on each individual lot, as opposed to more at the utility scale. Like, we don't ask individual lot owners to put in septic systems or to provide their own electricity. And so I think more approaching it holistically will facilitate sort of better and more growth where we want it. I agree with the sustainability focus that Ronnie brought in, and I did do some reading, and it's a little tricky. Just how do we tie that into planning specific issues in a small town? But I think there's ways we can do that if we keep it in mind. I'll call it with that. Thanks.
Okay, Karen or Mike?
Karen, go ahead.
Okay. So again, my comments were about the complete streets. Thanks, Nora, for putting that in there. Just looking at safe and accessible options for opportunities for travel, not having such an emphasis on a car-dependent community. I think it will hit a lot of environmental and health goals that would be beneficial for our community, and ties in, closer to economic development, for instead of trying to keep sourcing out on who we could get here, if we can develop a community that we would really enjoy living in, that creates a magnet for people in general. So, and then ADUs, again, we've been talking about affordable housing for, gosh, I think the last 20 some years, and ADUs is a really simple way that could bring some economic diversification for community members, and ease of, relieving that stress for, allowing locals to live here. So, yep, that's it for me.
Mike?
I'll just, only time to talk about one issue, water. One of the authors of the USGS report has done some more water tracing work. He's concluded in a journal article about to appear that we are already withdrawing the so-called safe yield amount. I'm talking about water now just from the city's wells and springs. State law requires that we conform to that. We can't mine the aquifer. There will be a groundwater management plan process getting going. But the bottom line on it for you guys and for council is that the era where we could blithely assume that we've got water to fund new development could be coming to a close before too long, regardless of the fact that the city has a lot of water rights. It's water withdrawals that we're talking about here. How much real water is out there to be used without mining the aquifer? So that will be another complication for you guys if, when you in effect bless will serve letters at planning commission time.
Okay, so we've heard from all the commission members and the council members. Thank you for that input and coming together. Nora, thank you so much for a look into the back, from the back door of the planning department. Thank you to you. Thanks to you and Corey for the work that you're doing to do all of the business plus entertain all of these additional projects and priorities that we have. So very grateful to all of us, and I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to everyone. We'll go ahead and log out, and then council members, we're just going to go ahead and log back in. But please do take the time you need. We've got a long meeting ahead, so if you need a few minutes, take what you need. And Nora, did you want to share one final thing?
So I will work on this, and then we'll schedule another work session.
That sounds
Thank you,
really
Nora.
great. Okay.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Council, we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having